Hey everybody. It's great to see you all again here. And so thank you so much for David for hosting. He's so awesome. One of the things that he had mentioned was if you guys want to see pictures of the work party and everything like that, we have it online. And so go check out our social medias and things like that to check out pictures. I purposefully told everybody yesterday, please don't take any pictures of me. I don't want evidence from my wife to know that I can actually do yard work. That was a big thing. But my allergies, if you guys see my eyes watering like crazy up here, but from that work party, my allergies are going crazy all day. How many of you guys are with me on the allergy season time right now? Man, I'm ready for the weather to pick a side. Either get warm or keep it. Let's figure it out. It's going to be great. But it was super awesome yesterday. And we also have a lot of extra food from yesterday that we're bringing into the congregational meeting today. So stay afterwards for the congregational meeting, hear all the news of what's going on, and also have some food. We've got some chicken and a whole bunch of other stuff back there. So have some food, have some lunch, and stay just a little bit longer. But today we're in 1 John. Today we get to be in 1 John where we're talking about the letters. And when we're talking about the letters, we're talking about the letters of the New Testament. So all the different letters of Paul and John and Peter and all of the amazing things that they put in there and how we were able to understand who Jesus is through them. And all the things that they told us back then that applies to us today. So we're going through it in its cultural and historical background and getting to know what the letters actually tell us. This week as I was praying and as I'm reading through and I'm looking at stuff, I kept thinking about a story from when I was younger. I used to grow up, when I was growing up, I used to actually love that show, Saturday Night Live. Anybody with me? Saturday Night Live when it was good, the good years, like when they had Adam Sandler and then you had Dana Carvey and Mike Myers and all the good players, Will Ferrell. I mean, come on, those were fun years. And one of my very favorite skits that they had was the skit called The Church Lady. Anybody remember that one? It was Dana Carvey. So Dana Carvey would don this wig, and every time Dana Carvey would be in this wig and play on this organ and piano and everything, then Dana Carvey would become the church lady. And the church lady would go ahead and tell everybody that they're evil, that they're horrible, that they're of Satan. Every time she would say Satan, it's always Satan, like that. If you listen to heavy metal, you're of Satan. If you listen to rap music, you're of Satan. Anything in the culture, you were of Satan. Well, one day I'm over in Venice Beach. I grew up in California, and so I'm in Venice Beach, and me and some friends are there with rollerblades, and we're going around, and we're having fun on the paths, and we're making all these little jumps and stuff. Everything that we were doing and all the little flips and stuff probably looked super, super lame, but in our heads, it looked like we were amazing. And one time, my friend, all of a sudden, I pull off this little jump, and my friend looks back at me, and he's like, dude, righteous, because it was California, and that was slang word at the time, righteous, man. It was surf culture. And all of a sudden, he yells out, righteous, as I'm doing this on rollerblades. And then all of a sudden, there's this group of people that starts walking past us. And in the middle is actually Dana Carvey. He was there filming something, and so he had his entourage there. And as I pull this off and my friend is like, righteous, all of a sudden Dana Carvey looked at us and he says, all these kids with rollerblades, righteous of Satan? Oh man, I was so happy. I got called out by the church lady. It was great. I was like, oh my goodness. But my friend, not so excited. My friend had never seen Saturday Night Live, doesn't know anything about Saturday Night Live, doesn't know anything about the church lady skits, doesn't even know Dana Carvey or any of that stuff. So all of a sudden, he's taking offense to Dana Carvey saying we're of Satan and trying to get into an argument of religion. He's very religious, devout. He's like, you should not ever call people of Satan. You should not do that. And this is not of Satan. And he's going to Dana Carvey's like, chill out, man. It was funny. I had to explain Saturday Night Live. I had to explain the skits and everything and explain what was going on. But he was confused. A lot of people in that time were confused about those skits. I actually really liked those skits, though, because it did actually tell us a little bit about what the culture thinks of Christianity. You see, the skits was all just satire. It's all satire about the church, and I don't know Dana Carvey's real feelings or anything about that in the church, but the way the church lady was broadcast was satire, and it was the impression that a lot of people have of the church and of people in the church that they're judgy, that they judge everything, that they call everything Satan, that we have to hate the world and you have to hate everything around you. Everything has to be hated around you because everything is evil, everybody's evil, let's hate everything. And then let's call it out, even while the people that are calling it out are often doing the things that they shouldn't be doing and the things that they're calling out in general as well, right? And that was the impression of the culture. Culture looks at that and says, hey, you have all these judgy Christians. You have all these Christians that hate everything and hate me and hate all these things. And that is horrible. There's also a flip side to the other side of Christian culture. There's another side of Christian culture that would say, okay, don't hate anything, don't hate it. We are all evil. There's the evil that's all around us and so forth. But because everything is so evil and because everything and everybody around us and everybody is broken and all of that, then really all you need is Jesus, and you don't really have to know Jesus. You don't have to follow Jesus. You don't have to do any of that stuff. All you really need is Jesus, so you could do whatever you want to do. Sin really isn't a thing, but all you got to do is pray to Jesus. You're good. We found the loophole. That's it. So there's two sides of culture. One that goes ultra religious, and ultra on the side of you have to follow the rules, and they only love the rules, and they become super devout, which is devout is great, but also super like we hate everything and everybody's evil. But then you also have the other side of culture saying, yes, everything is evil, and so it's impossible for us to live up to. That's why we need Jesus. So just accept Jesus, you're good, do whatever you want to do. Those are actually like the two crowds that John is dealing with in 1 John. In 1 John, there is a big split that's happening within the church. Within the church, there is a whole bunch of division. It's not just division from the outside. There's persecution that's happening from the outside. Tons of persecution. There's things that are happening to the church at the time, but even in the church, there's now divisiveness. There's these two sides of people. One that's saying everything is evil. You should never, ever do anything. In fact, the only thing you should do is lock yourself up in a room and don't talk to people because they're evil, they're horrible, and just follow the rules. That's it. And then you're going to be good with God. And then the other side of that coin was another side of people that was called Gnosticism. And they said, well, matter's evil. Everything is evil. Everything around us is evil. We should hate everything around us. And our own flesh is evil. Our own bodies are evil. And because we're all evil, the only thing good inside of us is the spirit, which means when we die, then God takes our spirit, which is good, but leaves our flesh behind. And therefore, we can do whatever we want to do right now because our sin is flesh. It's evil. Why fight it? Became wrong. So now there's these two sides of the coin. And here's the thing, is within our churches and within our communities, we still have those two sides. The two sides battling each other. So is there a middle ground though? Is there a middle ground for us to figure out, okay, what should we actually think about God? How should we actually react about God? How should we live this thing out? Should we have to be like super devout and calling out everything and everybody as evil of Satan? Or should we also be over here and saying, well, no, you know what? Because it's evil, it's impossible. Just trust in Jesus right before you die. In fact, right before you die, that's when you should accept Jesus. Like, is that right? No. Is there a middle ground? Well, there is a middle ground. There is a way for us to actually follow Jesus and know Jesus and continue on in Jesus in a way that actually builds faith and builds character and builds us in a way that becomes more like Jesus, more like Christ, in the way that Christ was actually telling us to be. And that's what John is discussing in the second chapter of 1 John. Let's go ahead and let's get into it now. First, let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this time. We thank you so much for this day. We pray, Jesus, that you would bless this heart or bless this word to our hearts and our minds. Be with us, Lord. Thank you, Jesus, for everything you do. Touch our hearts and minds today. Amen. Amen. So today we're going to be in 1 John chapter 2. So if you're following along, it's 1 John chapter 2. And there's a little bit of stuff that you need to know, some background of what's actually happening here. So it's in this time, it's about 85 AD. And in this time, John is talking to the church. And when I talk about the church, I'm talking about the church overall. He's not just singling out one specific church. What he's doing is he's actually doing it just like the letters we had here this morning, is he's writing a letter to the church as a whole, and he's expecting that that letter is going to get passed around to the multiple churches that are around. But those churches are dealing with a lot of problems. They've not only got persecution from the outside, they've got division from the inside. And a big part of that division from the inside is coming from people that just misunderstand Jesus. They don't really know Jesus. And they're coming up with their own ideas of who Jesus is without actually getting to know Jesus' commands and who Jesus is. And so John starts this out in this way. He says, we know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. So we know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. Whoever says, I know him, but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. Man, he comes out swinging, comes out harsh, saying, look, whoever claims to know him yet doesn't follow his commands, isn't actually doing the things that he's telling us to do, is a liar. That they're saying he doesn't really know him. That's something like what we deal with a lot today. There's a lot of people that say, oh, I know Jesus, I follow Jesus, I'm following Jesus all the time. It's like, great. Then what are his commands? What are you doing to actually follow that? And what John is actually picking apart here and what he's showing is he's saying, look, there's a lot of people that say, I know Jesus, I know God, I know who he is, I know all these things, but they don't know his commands, and because they don't know his commands, they're not living it out. They're just going around saying, we know Jesus, follow me, without actually knowing what they're supposed to do. So he's saying then that makes them a liar. And then he continues on and he says this, but if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. This is how we know we are in him. So he gives a qualifier. This is how you know that somebody who is proclaiming Jesus, who says, hey, I am of Jesus, I follow Jesus. This is how you know somebody, and including pastors. I'm going to include pastors in this, because pastors and church leaders and so forth, if you want to know, okay, how do we actually know that they are really faithful to Jesus, that they're following Jesus? Because you should always check that too. Like always check me as well, saying, hey, how do I know Jeremy is really a follower of Jesus? Well, John tells us. He says this. He says, whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. So if you claim to live in him, to have Jesus in your heart, and he is with you and you are in him, if you are with Jesus, then you live as Jesus did. Now, I don't want you guys to read this and then think, okay, now that means that I have to live exactly like Jesus did. I'm going to sell all my stuff. I'm going to go to my neighbors every single time it's time for a meal and say, hey, I'm showing up to your house for dinner, so like cook something nice, right? Jesus never owned anything. He didn't own things. He didn't have it. It's not saying that. It's not saying that you have to be exactly like Jesus, going from house to house to house, place to place to place. It doesn't say that you have to live like Jesus, like, okay, everybody has to be in ministry now. Go out and proclaim the gospel. It's not saying to be like that. What it's saying is to live like Jesus in his commands, to follow Jesus, to actually do what Jesus said. Because here's the really amazing thing about Jesus, is Jesus didn't just tell people, go and do this. No, Jesus did it and said, follow me. Isn't that amazing about Jesus? That Jesus didn't just say, go do this, don't do that, go do this, don't do that. He did what he said he was going to do. He did it, and he showed us the example. And that's what John is saying here. If you claim to be like Jesus, then be that example. Be the example of who Jesus was. Be the hands and feet of Jesus. Live like Jesus and show people who Jesus is by actually living like him, by living out those commandments. And then he continues on and he says, anyone who claims to be in the light but hates his brother or sister, he's giving us an example here of what is going on even within the church in that day and even in our churches today. And he says, anyone who claims to be the light but hates his brother or sister is still in the darkness. Anyone who loves their brother and sister lives in the light. He's saying, look, when we start doing the things that are opposed to Jesus, when we're going in the opposition, we're hating the people that are around us, hating brothers and sisters, hating people around us, that isn't of Jesus. It's a telltale sign, like if you're saying, man, I follow Jesus, I follow everything Jesus does and so forth, but then you're all of a sudden going to people and cussing them out all the time, and you're saying, I hate you, and I'm dismissing you and all that stuff. Can you say you're really a follower of Jesus? Because love isn't coming out. So what should we do? He continues on, and he gives us examples on how we can become more like Jesus by also what we shouldn't do. And he tells us this. And this verse right here is one of those misunderstood verses. This verse is one of those verses that a lot of people take out of context and then make it their own way. We're going to put it back into the context here because it's really, really important when we're looking at context. But he says this, do not love the world or anything of the world. So he's teaching us, how do you live like Jesus? How do you become more like Jesus? Do not love the world or anything of the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but of the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. Now I know some of you are thinking, Jeremy's in contradiction here, because here's John, and he's saying, hey, do not love the world or anything of the world. So that must mean that we must be like the church lady now, right? Telling everybody, you're of Satan. No heavy metal, no rap. None of that stuff. I will tell you guys, actually, I listen to heavy metal and rap, especially in the gym. There's some good Christian heavy metal and rap. And then there's also Metallica, and that's good too sometimes. But here's the thing, like there is okay stuff, but is that of Satan? Is that of like, okay, we have to call all that stuff out? No. Does it say in here that we have to hate everything of the world? It says do not love the world or anything of the world. Does that mean we also have to hate now everything that's of the world? There's a lot of people that have that opinion that would tell you, look, you have to hate everything in the world. The world is sinful, and that's why the world is going to end. In fact, right now we're in end times, and all of this stuff that people will say that we're in end times, and because the world is getting so horrible and so bad, and so therefore hate everything of the world. Jesus is coming soon. Live right. Is that what that verse is saying? No. In fact, it's not saying that we have to hate the world. In fact, if you notice that verse, there's nowhere in that verse that it says the word hate. It just says do not love the things of the world. And then he also clarifies it. Now, I want to clarify this to you as well. Like, what is in the world? Like, first off, God made the world, right? Should we love the things that God made? Yes, absolutely. God made people. They're in the world. Should we love the things that God made? Love people? Yes. Should be an easy one, right? So he's not specifically saying hate the world. He's not saying do not love the things that are of God in the world. In fact, John clarifies it. This is why context is key, why you have to look at the verses that come before and the verses that come after, because John clarifies it. He says right here, he explains exactly what he's talking about. For everything of the world that comes of the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of the Father live forever. What that means is we should not love the things that are not of God. It means that we're not hating the world. What we're hating or not hating, what we're disliking and saying we do not love is the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, the things that distract us away from God. Anything that is not born of God, that is not of God, that is not with God. Anything that is taking us away from God, the distractions of God, those are the things that we say we don't love. We don't want those in us. When we're talking about that, like lust of the flesh, that means that you should not love pornography, that you should not love deceit, that you should not love hate, that you should not love the things that are opposed to God, that you should not love boastfulness, you should not love a lack of humility. Those are the things that separate us from God. Those are the things that pull us away. That's what John is getting at here. He's saying, look, do not love the things that are in the world, that are born of the world, not of God. But we should love the things that are born of God. The earth is made of God, made with God. God made everything. We should love that. Love the grass, love the flowers, love the allergies. Not so much. Okay, there's one thing we can hate, allergies. Let's go with that. But you should love the things that God made, but you should also not love the things that distract us away from God. And that's what John is saying here. He's not saying become the church lady. He's saying, look, just recognize what is made of God and what is not of God. And the things that are not of God, dismiss those. Say, I don't love those. I don't want those. I don't want those in my life. There's a lot of people, though, that would say, okay, well, they would use this verse and they say, well, then we have to hate the things of the world because the world is about to end. And they would use this next verse to actually show that, because now all of a sudden, here's John and he's clarifying his statement on what you should love and not love. And he clarifies it by using the words Antichrist and Antichrists. Oh no, we're getting real now. A lot of people are like, oh, this is where it gets end-timey. This is where it comes to the apocalypse. But this verse that we're about to talk about is not actually apocalyptic. It's not an end of the world type verse. It says this, dear children, this is the last hour. And as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have come. This is how we know it is the last hour. They went out from us and they did not really belong to us. A lot of people will read this verse and they take it out of context. They take it out of this chapter and they put it in a place where it becomes end of world verses. And you take these things out of context. But John here is not actually talking about the end of the world. He's not talking about apocalypse. He's not talking about all of that stuff. A lot of times people will take these and they kind of piecemeal it together into something else. But John is very much talking to the community that's there and even to us today. It's not something that we can pull out and take out of context. This is why it's so important that we keep Scripture in context. So what is he actually talking about? What is happening right now at this time? Because if you notice, like a lot of people would look at this verse and they say, oh, this is a future verse. It has to be a future verse. But John specifically says here, dear children, this is the last hour, as in right now. And he's talking to churches right then. And then he also says that even now many antichrists have come, meaning past tense, they've already come, they're there. And he also tells us that some were part of their church, because he says this, they went out from us, but they did not really belong to us. So he's not talking about future here. What he's talking about is then, right now, and also in that time. But it's also a very eternal truth that he's describing here as well. So what's happening to John? What's going on? What is the context behind this? At the time John is writing this, it's 85 AD. So it's 85 AD and the church is split, it's fractured. People are all over the place. People are being persecuted. Jews and Christians alike, they're being persecuted and horrifically persecuted. I mean, horrific. You had the past emperor, Emperor Nero, who had come in and he was taking Christians and trying to get rid of them. He blamed the Christians for the great fire of Rome. And he said it's the Christians' fault because they believe in one God and they're not believing in the Roman gods and so forth. So now we must get rid of them. And he was crucifying them. He was putting them on sticks. He was literally skinning people alive. And he was making examples of people. It was horrific. It was horrible. That was Emperor Nero. Emperor Nero also told everybody that when he died, he's going to come back, be resurrected, and he's going to finish the job. And there was fear amongst the Christians and the Jews that would happen, that this is going to take place. But then you also had Domitian. So Domitian is actually the next emperor to come in Rome. And now you have Domitian. And Domitian, he's there and he's continuing on the persecution, the horror for the Christians and the churches there. He's hurting them. And now they're becoming fractured and scattered. And there's difficulty that's happening. And this is where John is saying, hey, this right now, he says, this is the last hour. Because to them, it is the last hour. To them, it's the last hour of the church. It's the last hour of Rome. It's the last hours of the church as they knew it. It's as they knew it. It's the last time for them. This isn't something that we pull out of the context and then say, oh, this goes to the future. It's something that they were living in right then. It was the last hours for them of Rome and of their Christian church and their Jewish church. It's also a time where the temple was gone. It was just demolished in AD 70. And for all the Jews in that land were like, where do we go? We can't worship anywhere. We can't go anyplace. God's no longer with us, because they believed that God was residing in the temple, and now the temple's destroyed. So to them, this looks like the last hour. And then he tells us, you have heard about the Antichrist, and then you have heard of these Antichrists. And then he says that even then, that the Antichrists have already come, and they went out from us, but they did not really belong to us. There's two words there, Antichrist and Antichrist. Now, we're not going to be talking about Antichrist right now because that's end of the world stuff. Let's talk about that later and all that stuff. We're going to have a whole other sermon coming later about those things. But I want to focus in on that Antichrists. Notice it's plural. That is plural. He says there's many Antichrists. And that they were already there and they've come out from them. That they've come out from the church. So what is he talking about? Well, that word Antichrists, it just means to be anti-Christ, to be Antichristos. And Antichristos just means that it is in separation or in opposition to Jesus. Separation or opposition to God. Separation and opposition to the things of God or characteristics of God. It means to have a mindset that is more towards Antichrist versus towards Jesus. Towards having a mindset of God. It's having a mindset that's more towards the world, but not towards God and towards Jesus. And John even clarifies that, and he explains this in there. He says, down here, he says that I do not write this because you do not know the truth, but because you do know it, because no lie comes from the truth. Who is a liar? It is whoever denies that Jesus is the Christ. Such a person is the Antichrist, denying the Father and the Son. No one who denies the Son as the Father, no one who denies the Son has the Father, and whoever acknowledges the Son has the Father also. So what he's saying is, look, when people are denying Christ, when they're saying, hey, we're going in opposition of that, it's the opposition that is making them antichrists. It was just a mindset of going towards the world, going towards something different than God and Jesus. He's not calling a whole bunch of people out and saying, these people are all of Satan. It's not like that. What he's saying is, look, they're the opposition. And there was many that came from the church and went out from the church. He says, look, there was people that came out from this. He's saying those are the people that were in opposition. So what is opposition? Like, to really understand what this word, this little a Antichrist mean, to understand what this means is it means to live in opposition. And it's not just to say in opposition. It's not just to say, I deny Christ. And a lot of people today, they have this idea that if you deny Christ, if you say, I don't believe in this, then you must be all the way over on this other side and you have to be of Satan, right? That's not true. He's just saying, look, it's the people that have rejected Christ, that have rejected the gospel, that have rejected the mindset of God, that no longer want to be a part of that mindset of God. And even people within the church can have that wrong mindset. It's the opposition. And so what does opposition actually look like? Well, opposition looks like this. Love, Jesus taught us to love. Jesus taught us to love. But if all of a sudden we're filled with revenge, with contempt, with justice seeking, with hurting fellow believers or the people outside of the church, are we really following Jesus' commands? No, we're following more of the world. And he's saying there's a lot of people that were in the church in that day that were doing that. They were saying, no, we follow Jesus, yet they're also hating the community around them. And they're hating the brothers and sisters that are within them. Jesus taught us to have unity. What is the opposite of unity? To have division, minimizing others, to be disregarding others, to harm people within the body of Christ. If we have a spirit of all of a sudden going against each other and saying, man, we're just going to fight amongst each other in the division, are we following what Jesus is telling us to do? No. We've got a mindset more towards the world, not towards Jesus. Humility. Jesus taught us to be humble. But if we're being boastful, if we're prideful, if we're putting ourselves above everyone else, then are we following what Jesus told us to do? No. In love of the kingdom and God, Jesus called us to love the kingdom and God, but the opposite to that is love of worldly things. The things that separate us from God. The things that are distracting us from God and hurting our walk with Christ. When we love those more than we're loving Christ, more than we're loving God, are we actually following Jesus? Are we becoming more like him? Or are we having a mindset that is opposed? And that's what John is talking about here. There was a lot of people in that day that weren't just saying those things and saying, hey, we're going to be in opposition to this and all that, but they were also walking it out. To to understand this, what he's saying, it's not just to say against Christ, it's also living it out, saying, I believe in Jesus, yet at the same time, I'm going to do everything in my life to show I don't believe in Jesus. To go in complete opposite. And John has a good basis for saying this too. In fact, it's actually a commandment. Did you guys know that? It's one of the commandments. You guys ever heard of that commandment, that little one that everybody talks about? Do not say the Lord's name in vain. Anybody heard that before? Do you know it really doesn't say, do not say the Lord's name in vain? A lot of people think of that as what I'm supposed to do or pull from that commandment is I should not use God's name as a cuss word. Do not cuss and use God's name. What that commandment actually means, when we find out in Exodus, what that actually means is you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. For the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name, or will not hold anyone guiltless who uses his name. Do not misuse the name of the Lord. What it's actually saying here is with your words and your actions, do not go out there and say, I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, and then all of a sudden you're going and doing everything in opposition to Jesus. If you're doing and acting and saying everything in opposition to God, then what you're doing is actually hurting the church and hurting people around you because they're looking at you saying, oh, this is a good Christian, yet you're doing all of the things that are not good, steering people astray, and it's misusing God's name. That's what the commandment means. And that's what John is talking about is, man, if there's a whole lot of people that are within the church that are claiming Jesus, 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 yet they don't know his commands, they don't know who Jesus is, they aren't following Jesus, they aren't really doing that, they're just proclaiming Jesus, yet doing whatever they want to do, it makes the church look false. It makes the church look wrong. It also makes Jesus look like a fool. It misuses his name. It takes his name and puts it out of context because people will always see our actions and our words and associate that with who we proclaim we follow. And that was what was happening with John within the church in that day, saying, look, there's so many people that are on different sides. They're on different sides. They're over here and they're proclaiming you have to follow the rules. You have to follow all of this stuff. Everything else is evil. It's horrible. You should hate it. It's of Satan. And then you have all the people over here that are saying do whatever you want to do because there's no hope anyways. And don't worry, God's just going to cleanse you anyway. But John is telling us, no, that's wrong. There's a middle ground. There's a middle ground. So how do we find that middle ground? He tells us. He says this, so here's what we do. He says, and now, dear children, continue in him. Continue in him so that when he appears, we may be confident and unashamed before him in coming. And if you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone who does what is right has been born of him. That last verse, if you know that he is righteous, then you know that everyone who does what is right has been born of him. It's a big verse. In fact, that verse is actually taken from a modern cultural idea that they had back then. And the idea that they had back then was this. When you have a father, and you have a son and a daughter, the son and daughter become like the father. Become the father's characteristics. So like the father becomes the son and daughter. That was the cultural norm. The idea, and what he's getting to in that verse is saying this. He's saying, look, I want you to know that he is righteous. If you know that God is righteous, if you know that Jesus is righteous, that he's connected to the Father, and I love how John starts this out, dear children, meaning you are children of God, saying if you know that he is righteous, that Jesus is righteous, meaning connected with God, together with God, that he is perfect, that he is everything that he says he is. If you know that, then continue to follow him. Be guided by him. Recognize that. Understand that. And then you know that everyone who does right has been born of him, meaning we're actually knowing that and internalizing that. We know his commands. We know Jesus' commands. And we're continually walking with Jesus, developing a relationship with Jesus. Then so like the Father becomes the son and daughter. What he's saying is we can start having the characteristics. The more we follow Jesus, the more you're following Jesus and you're following God and you're saying no to the world, to the worldly things, to the things that are distracting, to the things that are getting us further and further away from God. But if we're saying, no, I want to be more connected to God and continually connected to him, and we're following those things, we start to become more and more like Jesus. We become more and more like him. And we start to do right. And love what's right, and understand what's right, and understand the things that are within us. Understand who God is. But we have to become more and more like him by following him every day. As we conclude today and the band comes up, I'll tell you this all boils down. This all boils down to one phrase. It's God-mindedness. John is talking about the opposition of God-mindedness. He's saying, look, the world is the opposition to God-mindedness. He's not saying everything in the world is evil, everything is the chair's not evil, the grass isn't evil, the plants aren't evil, all that stuff. People in general, he's like, man, God created people. We should love people. He's not saying hate everything in the world. What he's saying throughout this is he's saying that we should become more and more like God. The more we follow Jesus, the more we know his commands, the more things that we're actually doing with Jesus, we should become more and more like God. We should become more and more like Jesus. You're never going to become exactly like God, okay? So just get that out of your heads right now too. Like, if you're like, oh, I'm going to follow this, and man, check out what I'm going to do when I'm 90. I meet 90-year-olds. They can't walk on water still. Be cool if they could. But I'll tell you, what this is talking about is having a mindset. Saying, hey, how do we switch that mindset within us? Saying, I don't want the worldly mindset, instead I want the God mindset. I want to be focused on God. So to be God-minded, in order to be God-minded and focused on God and living in the right way towards God and saying, God, I want to make you everything in my life. God, I want to follow you. God, I want to know the right way. I want to know your commands and live out your commands. God, I want to be in a relationship with you, connected to you. Then we need to be God-centered. And how we become God-centered is we have to actually get to know him. Here's what was happening in the church in John's day, and this is happening in churches all across America today too. It's in John's day, there was a whole lot of people that were proclaiming Jesus, saying, Jesus, I know you. Jesus, I love you. Jesus, I am for you. Yet, they weren't taking any time to actually get to know Jesus. They weren't actually figuring out his commands and trying to walk and live like Jesus. They were saying, I love the idea of Jesus, but I don't really want to do the things of Jesus, while still proclaiming Jesus. And that made them to where they were not God-centered, to where they didn't have the God mindset. They weren't God-minded, they weren't God-centered, because they couldn't be God-centered because the things that they were following were the things more of the world and not of God. Part of that is also there's this thing that's called religious apathy, or this religious exhaustion. There's a thing even today, it's called religious exhaustion, and we see it all the time, where people grow up in church, they grow up and they start reading the Bible and they read these things, but then you get through the Bible once, twice, 3 times, and you're like, oh man, I think I already know everything. And if you're somebody who says, okay, I think I already know everything, I don't need to pray, I don't need to read the Bible or anything like that, anytime you think that you know everything about God, first off, I'll tell you, number one, that's wrong. Because he's literally the author of heaven and earth and the world and everything. And you, like, there is more that God can teach us in 100 lifetimes than we will ever learn right now. You are never done learning with God. Never done learning with God. We'll tell you that. But there is this time where there's people that become religiously exhausted, where they're like, okay, I think I've done this, I've done all this, I've heard these messages, I've done these things. And now I'm exhausted, and they start going away from God, start going away from prayer, start going away from the Bible. There was people in that day that John's talking to that were doing the same, where they were saying, okay, we've heard the message, we think, but we're going to keep going in our own direction. And John's telling them, no, keep on it. Keep going through it. He tells us that now children, dear children, continue in him. It means no matter where you are in life, continue in him, continue reading the Bible, continue praying, continue getting to know him, continue meeting together with us, continue to be together with other believers and with other people that can strengthen you, that can guide you and help you. It's important. Because once we stop continuing those things, that's when we lose our focus. And we start to focus on the things of the world and the things that distract instead of the things that actually bring us closer to God. We need to concentrate on being more God-minded by being God-centered. And the center of God, by being God-centered, is to say, I'm going to lean in. I'm going to lean into God. I'm going to keep on going for God. I'm going to keep on praying. I'm going to keep on reading. I'm going to keep on getting to know. I'm going to keep on meeting together. And I'm going to keep on serving God. Serving where he wants me to go. And I promise when we have that mindset, when you have that mindset, all throughout your life, I don't care what age you are, God will continue to teach you. God will continue to grow you. I met a man this week, 92 years old. 92 years old, he's a pastor, been a pastor for 72 years. Came, he spoke at this pastor's group that we were having. He talked about his struggles. He talked about the things that were happening. And he talked about all the things that Jesus was teaching him now and in that day. It was so cool to hear from this 92-year-old that is still learning from Jesus. And it was even more amazing that when he's telling us about what he's learning from Jesus, the excitement that came out of his mouth, the excitement that was flowing out of his body, he was almost like jumping up and saying, man, let's celebrate because Jesus is so amazing. He was excited like a child in faith because God is still teaching him. God still has more to teach you. God still has more to give you. Jesus has more to teach you. There's more to give you and show you. Keep being in him. Don't proclaim to be a Christian and do all the things that are wrong, that you know are wrong, that are out there. Are we going to make mistakes? Yeah, absolutely. We're going to make mistakes, for sure. We talked about that last week. But be that one that's out there saying, man, I'm going to focus on this. I want to be God-centered. I want to be God-focused. And when we're God-centered and God-focused and learning from him, that's when we become more like him. So this week, focus on that. Focus on that. Think of the characteristics of God. Think of who God is and what we're doing to actually have a relationship with him. Look at your life and say, am I doing the things that I need to do to have a relationship with him, or am I putting God on the back burner? Am I putting God on the back burner and just giving in to these things over here? If you are, take a look at that and say, all right, how do I need to refocus? And refocus this week. Refocus. Get back in the Word. Get back into prayer. Get back into groups. Get back in together and say, I want to focus and be God-centered. Let's do that all together. Do that all together this week.